It's funny, but if you remember, it wasn't that long ago that the Oakland Raiders were a pretty popular punching bag for me, somewhat similarly to the Jacksonville Jaguars and, of course, the skid marks, the Cleveland Browns. And whether Raiders fans like it or not, the truth is the organization, yes, with their history and so on and so forth, that's great. But we live in a what have you done for me now lately type of world. And Al Davis did his best to run that damn organization into the ground. And even once he died, it didn't feel like initially that things were getting a whole lot better. Especially coming off of that 2013 draft, DJ Hayden, that was a bust. But then 2014 comes around, they draft Khalil Mack, number 5, who was my number 1 rated defensive player in that draft. They take Derek Carr in round 2, they get Gabe Jackson, they get Justin Ellis, and all of a sudden it feels like things are starting to move in the right direction for the Raiders, and they quickly stopped becoming a punching bag for me. A few years later now, I wonder if we're going to get to a point where they might become the punching bag for me again. You're talking about a team that just gave a 10-year contract to a head coach that hasn't coached in a decade, getting ready to move to Las Vegas, and then gracing us with this draft class that they put together. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in thinking that the Raiders are one of the worst performers in this draft. I'm pretty sure a lot of Raiders fans were not particularly pleased with the way this draft broke down. Pretty sure a lot of Raiders fans feel like there were multiple busts taken early, and they really worry about this John Gruden, McKenzie combination running the show in Oakland. And I got to be honest with you. The initial returns here are not great. The players that they are signing in free agency that are all over the age of 30, older players, usually gives you an even shorter window to expect anything out of them. A lot of these guys on the downside of their career. Where's the logic in that? And then multiple reaches early in the draft. Not a great combination. Now, it's funny. I had the Raiders trading down in round 1 to take Colton Miller, the offensive tackle from UCLA. And it happened. And oh my, oh my, oh my, how Raiders fans were dismayed. You got Tremaine Edmonds on the board. You've got freaking Derwin James on the board. Jair Alexander. Any combination of players on the board. And they went with Colton Miller. Yep. And I understand and I agree. He was an athlete, yes, but can he actually block? And I think that's a fair question. And I felt like he was at least a 1-round, if not arguably a 2-round reach here. I understand trying to get an athletic offensive tackle thinking about the future. I understand wanting to beef up that offensive line to improve the protection long-term for Derek Carr. That makes sense. But golly, Kolton Miller at pick 14 in a draft just doesn't seem right. Pick 15, excuse me, whatever. It just seems like a massive reach. And yeah, sometimes when picks are criticized as massive reaches, they do work out. And there is very good chance or possibility that this pick could work out. And a lot of us are eating crow in 3 years. But are you going to tell me that Kolton Miller was better than every other player taken after him? I would feel very confident about going to Las Vegas ahead of the Raiders and placing down a bet that at least 5 of the guys taken in round 1 will have better, more productive NFL careers that were taken after Kolton Miller, where he was taken at pick 15. I said, that's just me. Now, granted, based off of where the Raiders were, it made sense for them to trade back from 10 to 15, especially once McGlinchey went off the board, and where they had Kolton Miller clearly rated on their board. But you still were able to trade back, pick up additional picks, and you got defensive studs sitting on the board, and you pass all of them by for a project offensive tackle. Ugh. And then in round 2, P.J. Hall? over even a guy like Nathan Shepard, PJ Hall, that even when they're showing his highlight clip, it's all him blocking field goals. What that means is the networks that were covering the draft were fully anticipating this guy going like round 5 or 6, maybe round 4, and didn't think they had to put that much time together for a package. You're trying to emphasize the thing that he does well, which is block kicks on special teams, not be taken in the damn second round. Just because he went to Sam Houston State doesn't mean that because you haven't heard of him that he's going to be a bust. It comes down to more so the fact the player, to me, in no way, shape, or form merited a second-round pick here. I thought that was insane. And then to trade when they did in the early portion of round 3 and take another offensive tackle in Brandon Parker, if they would have just taken Brandon Parker in round 3 and taken somebody like Tremaine Edmonds at pick 15, I'd have felt a lot better about this draft. I'd have been like, I still think the P.J. Hall pick might be a regretful one, but you've got a defensive stud in Edmonds, which this team needs. Brandon Parker in round 3, sure, gamble on the athletic upside as a potential left tackle in the future. I get that. But you took 2 tackles with your first 3 picks, and they honestly both felt like reaches a little bit here. Arden Key at the tail end of round 3, to me, is Randy Gregory 2.0. I don't have an issue with them taking him there because, again, it was late round 3, which I thought was the absolute earliest he should have been drafted. But I don't know. Feels like he could potentially bust out too. Now, to be fair to the Raiders, they had a pretty good day 3. I think Nick Nelson's going to be a solid slot corner for them. Maurice Hurst in round 5. If his heart is good, then he is going to vastly outplay his draft position. You get the punter Johnny Townsend from Florida in round 5. You've got your young punter for the future. I look at some of what they did in day 3, and I'm like, shit. If you would have told me that Maurice Hurst was their second-round pick and P.J. Hall was their fifth-round pick, I'd probably look at this draft a little bit better for them. And it's also curious, again, because it feels like the day 3 picks, some of them, might have more long-lasting impact on the Raiders than the day 1 and day 2 picks will. That's a weird place to be at. Now, with that said, for the Raiders fans that are kind of despondent right now and saying to themselves, God, I hope day 3 kind of saves it, there's precedent for this. I look back at my Chicago Bears in 1999. They maneuvered in that draft, traded back to pick 12 in round 1, got a bunch of additional draft pick capital because Ditka was so eager to go up and get Ricky Williams. He was willing to literally trade just his entire draft to do so. So, the Bears at pick 12, of course, because they were the Bears, get themselves out of position for Culpepper and in the process take Cade McNown, who quickly washed out of the league. Then in round 2, they took a defensive tackle from UNC in Russell Davis, who ended up having a lengthy career, but it wasn't with the Bears. He was a total and complete bust for them. So their first 2 picks they crapped out on. This is the old traditional day 1 of the draft. But day 2 of the draft, rounds 3 through 7, they took guys like Marty Booker and Warwick Coleman, Roosevelt Colvin, Jerry Azuma. If I recall correctly, Jim Finn was in that draft. They got several foundation core guys out of that draft that ended up being contributors to that Bears team that in 2001 won the NFC Central at the time and went 13-3. With the first 2 picks in that draft contributing nothing. They had 4 or 5 guys that panned out on the old day 2, rounds 3 through 7. And it can still be thought of as a solid draft class. It's just frustrating because you think of what could have been if the first 2 picks would have been better. So yes, potentially, this day 3 picks will save the Raiders draft. But I do caution, Miller's got athleticism. I think Parker's got some promise too. These 2 guys could end up being your potential bookend tackles for Derek Carr for years to come. And if that's the case, this draft class is going to look a whole lot better. But right now, I totally and completely understand why so many Raiders fans are not pleased with this draft, why so much of the draft media has been crushing them for this draft, because I feel like on paper, looking at the entirety of the body of work, this was easily one of the worst performances by an organization this year.